Here's a drum loop I've recorded off vinyl. You can hear it's a stereo recording of a live drum kit and lots of record crackle in the background. You can also hear that the hi-hat is louder on the right hand side than it is on the left. There's lots of stuff you can do with drum loops in Ableton Live, no matter which version you have, such as we can put audio effects on, audio effects like utility here, which does nothing by default, it just lets the stereo sound pass through, but you can choose to listen to just the right or just the left. So in this case, we hear the hi-hats as being louder and close if we listen to just the right side, or more distant and quieter if we listen to just the left. If you use EQ3, you can isolate the kick drums from the hi-hats. You can also use EQ8 for this, and you can see the spectrum changing in the background while we do this. Even without audio effects, there's so much you can do with the source sound, such as you can change the rhythm of the beat by using the warp markers, or right-click on the clip to access the slice to MIDI function, which basically turns this into a playable instrument, using those original source sounds divided up into hits that you can either draw in or play in by hand. It's almost endless the number of ways that you can transform a single drum loop in Ableton Live. Perhaps another one worth mentioning is using the warp mode to shorten the length of each hit, or achieving the similar sort of thing using multiband dynamics. But in Live 9 specifically, there's a function potentially more powerful than all of these, because converting drums to MIDI will allow you to isolate things by frequency, just like the EQ will separate things into kicks and hi-hats. It will allow you to create new patterns entirely out of this original drum loop, just like the slicing to MIDI will. But most importantly, it lets you completely change the sounds that are being played. And that's what we're going to have a look at here. But just before we do that, probably one of the most useful things you can do to get the most out of this function is to make sure that all your transient markers are in the correct positions. These little grey markers are Ableton Live detecting where the drum hits fall, and you can move these around holding Shift. Keeping in mind for this particular drum loop, because the hi-hats are on the right, if you want to mark up one of the hi-hats, you should line it up with the bottom portion of the waveform. And one more preparation tip, if any of the hi-hat hits appear too small to see or to be able to tell where they lie, you can temporarily increase the clip volume to increase the size of the waveform, and then once you've marked it up, drop it back down. So having already done all the hits for this loop, I've accurately mapped the human feel of the drummer playing this beat. So now I can right-click and convert drums to MIDI and extract all that information, which brings up a MIDI drum kit, plus a MIDI clip that recreates the pattern of the kick, of the snare, and the hi-hat. In addition to this, it's also extracted the human timing of each hit, and it's allocated velocity data for each note by analyzing the waveform volumes. Now I could just swap out the sounds and I could change up the patterns and do whatever I want with this stuff, but I'm just going to show you something else. So I'm just going to bring in some clips that I was playing with a moment ago, and with this extracted loop, let's say we'll just leave the hi-hats in. Let's convert the kick and snare into a pattern for this bass sound. That pattern will do. I'm just using black notes. What I'll do next is I'll just use the duplicate loop button here to double the length of the loop and make one or two, maybe just one variation here, just so it doesn't feel too short a phrase. And here I'm just going to use these two patterns, one from the hi-hat and one from the kick and snare, to start building a little track. So all these orange clips that you see on the screen here, they've all come from this one drum loop, this one little vinyl recording. Literally all I've done so far is just assign this MIDI data to different sounds. I haven't yet altered their velocity data, haven't changed the durations, haven't even played with the overall rhythm, just moved some notes around and assigned it to different instruments. So you can get creative with the sound source and how you prepare it for converting. You can also get creative with the resulting MIDI data. So not only the notes, but also the velocities and how it can control various things. But before I sign off, just a couple more audio effects worth looking at. We can use resonators to tune the drums and play notes or chords. And if you have the Suite version of Ableton Live, then you can use Corpus, which is a tunable filter that not only will it make a tuneful sound, you can also control the pitch using a MIDI clip, using MIDI sidechaining.